of how for years Russia has been using its culture for its imperialistic goals. How Russia was colonizing its border countries, including Ukraine, but not only, Belarus, Poland, Georgia, Armenia, Chechnya. This list of countries is endless. It was selling its culture as a standard of Slavic culture, claiming that Ukrainian, Belarusian, Polish, Chechen, Armenian, Georgian cultures do not exist. Today, we see the fruits of it. They say that not only Ukrainian culture, our identity does not exist. Our culture is artificial. Who's next on this list of imperialistic aspirations? Even more, Russia is openly claiming that culture is a weapon of their propaganda. It's a weapon to spread the so-called Ruski Mir, Russian world, and the ideology of Russianism. We will show you now a short flash mob, an artistic representation of how colonial Russia has been silencing Ukraine, Ukrainians, and the voices of our culture for years. Enjoy.
Россия страна террористов. Россия страна террористов. Россия страна террористов. Россия страна террористов.
We will give you a little discourse in the Russian point of view. What exactly or how exactly the democratic countries, liberal countries, are falling in trap of the Russian propaganda and are becoming instruments of Russian propaganda. This is very, very clever instrument, actually, the clever way to approach the foreign policy. Russia uses culture when nothing else works. A little introduction who I am. I am Marta Brandi. I am the head of Promote Ukraine, but I am also an international lawyer. And a few years ago, I made a research on Russian propaganda and on Russian information war. The sovereignty actually is the field of my expertise. So I will give you a little, so to say, lecture on how Russia views culture as an instrument of propaganda. So Russia is known by propaganda and by information war. And do you know what information war actually consists of? Like normal war, it consists of defense and offense. Same information war, it consists of offensive information and defensive information. And offensive information is information attacks. And what do information attacks have to do with culture, will you ask? Well, one of the Russian ideologists, Russian Putin's ideologist, Igor Ashmanov, who is the manager of Runet, Russian internet, and he was also Putin's trustee during the presidential election. He says that Russian attacks are actually information sword. And one of the aspects of information sword is culture, is using concerts, music, art, as information sword, as information attack. 2 weeks ago, Russian Federation adopted a new concept of humanitarian cooperation of the Russian Federation with foreign states. Listen carefully. According to the concept, it is in the national interest of Russia to present the Russian culture to the foreign audience. The goals of humanitarian policy, of Russian Federation abroad, a better perception of Russia, and expanding contacts between people, while the task is to protect traditions and values of Ruski Mir. It is in the concept of humanitarian policy of Russia to protect the Ruski Mir, Russian world, to promote the Russian world. The aspects that influence the perception of Russia are creating positive cultural codes of Russia, so it becomes attractive for foreign audience and demonstrating the Russian mission of being a liberator. And we all know how Russian liberation looks like in Ukraine. It liberates Ukrainian territory from Ukrainians. That is liberation from Russia, and that is in the humanitarian policy of Russian Federation. Russian state is perceived as a protector of traditional values, and this has to be promoted. Culture is an instrument for mutual understanding and smoothing out contradictions between states. Russian culture is a soft power that is neutralizing anti-Russian mood that is created by politics, those who believe that politics and art, politics and culture are divorced, look into Russian concept of humanitarian policy. International cultural cooperation is called to create favorable conditions for realizing of the foreign policy of Russian Federation and overcoming differences. Promotion of Russian culture is done through the international project called Russian Seasons. Promotion of Russian culture is basically realization of humanitarian policy that is part of foreign policy of the Kremlin. One may argue that it is the case with the most of the countries, but the difference is that in Russia, the soft power, the culture is imposed from top down, not from bottom up like in democratic countries. I will read for you the citation of the director of Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. Our recent exhibitions abroad are just a powerful cultural offensive. If you want, a kind of special operation, which a lot of people don't like. But we are coming, and no one should be allowed to interfere with our offensive. By the beginning of the special operation in Ukraine, exhibitions of Russian museums were everywhere. This was our, if you like, special operation, a great cultural offensive. Culture is part of Russian war. Either you comfort it or you resist it. The choice is yours.
It's interesting to hear how now institutions, cultural institutions in Europe and other democratic world are claiming that Russian cultural pieces that are not from this regime, not of the era of Putin's regime, do not belong to it and do not constitute it. May we remind you that for more than 400 years, Russia has been banning Ukrainian language. We were not allowed, we did not dare to speak our language, because that meant tomorrow you don't exist. Ukrainian authors had a specific list of topics they could cover. They could write stuff about melodrama, but you know, not serious things, because, I mean, those primitive colonized people, how can they speak about serious things? And the way the colonizer is putting the needles together is by portraying colonized as primitive, those who don't have will, and those who need a colonizer to decide. And now you see, Russia is liberating us, right? Russia is telling how we have to live, who we are, how we self-identify ourselves. And the main way to do this is to promote Russian culture in the heart of democratic world, right? To say that Europe, quote, nihilistic decay, falling Europe and the collective West cannot live without great Russian culture. This is what they say. This is exactly what Russian propagandists say, that their great Russian culture is something we cannot survive without. And somehow Russian culture is used to build peace and build bridges. I'm sorry, but why is it not Ukrainian culture that is used to build bridges? Those who have been marginalized, who have been silenced for years, no, we build bridges with Russian culture. with the culture of an aggressor, with the culture of a colonizer and oppressor. This is like, you know, like if France attacked Belgium, denying Belgian identity and culture, denying Belgian existence. Some, I don't know, far rights would do that. And then somebody would decide that the best way to promote peace is to stage French drama from the imperialistic times. This is how it feels to us. Exactly this. And we deny that people who come here, those Russians, who come here to perform in those plays, to play this music, whatever, they are dissidents. I mean, they never said anything against the war. Why should they? Why the public figure? Why the opinion maker has to speak up against the regime he does not agree with? Why? It's just, I mean, it's difficult. It's, you lose the job. You might end up in jail. Why? It doesn't matter that Ukrainians, meanwhile, are just dying, being massacred, being raped, being tortured. It doesn't matter. We have those sensitives for those who cannot speak up against the regime. I don't want to undermine the activities of those who do, but can we really trust the people who never oppose the regime publicly and say that they are dissidents? And that's why we call them to promote peace here in the heart of Europe. I think those people who legitimize the regime with their silence, they cannot promote democracy. I'm sorry. This is not the way democracy works. Democracy works through speaking up. Democracy works through fighting, through opposing, through coming to demonstrations and saying what you think. Being there, thinking that you cannot change anything. That these are some big guys, some gods in the air that decide. No, it's you who decide. We citizens, we are deciding, and we do not legitimize authoritarian regimes, fascist regimes, that are killing thousands of Ukrainians, Belarus, Chechnya, Armenia, Georgians. Who's next? Stop promoting Russian culture. 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 And I must say, there is one very important thing that I have to say. We are here not to shame any institution that is not aware of this. We are here to warn. We are here to make cultural institutions and those who consume cultural products aware that propaganda is not apolitical. Propaganda is part of politics. Propaganda and culture as a mean of propaganda is something that is shaping our values. these values, they are creating the identity. The identity is forming a nation, and a nation is building a ground for a political regime. So if culture does not promote these very basic human values, moral values, how can we say that it doesn't matter? That it has nothing to do with the decisions that we make on how to live, what future to build. How is culture not related to politics? Do you believe it? And there is one more thing that I want to clarify. Many people think that culture is here to build bridges. Yeah, I mean, indeed, it's good to be friends. But you can be friends with somebody who raped your mother, not like in 5 minutes after it happened, right? You can be friends in 30 years. When the atrocities stop happening, and when those who were performing them, who were legitimizing them with their silence, they take the responsibility. Responsibility is not the same as guilt. No. Guilt, you have something for what you have individually done. But responsibility is much more broad issue. There is political responsibility for legitimizing the regime. There is moral responsibility for you to take actions when you see that something what is happening is wrong. The moral responsibility is about taking action to at least minimize the impact. This is the responsibility. And many German philosophers, after the World War II, they were raising the awareness of the collective responsibility that they themselves, as those who did not support the regime but were just there, they took this responsibility. And this was conscious decision. This is why all the peace building, bridge building, this is for later. For now, the genocide, the terrorism, it has to stop. And then we will talk, okay? Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Україна! 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 Слава героям ЗСУ! Слава героям ЗСУ! Слава героям ЗСУ! Glory to Ukrainian heroes! Glory to Ukrainian heroes! Glory to Ukrainian heroes!
Добрий день, люденьки! Здравствуйте усі! Що ви всі носи посупили? Вище голову, не маємо права опускати голову. Так, посміхаємось, друзі, всі поаплодували собі за те, що ви прийшли. Для мене таких аплодисментів сьогодні не буде. Дякую кожному, хто сьогодні приєднався до нас. Ви молодці, тому що не відсиджуєтесь вдома, погода нормальна, навіть дощу нема. Так? Біля НАТО було гірше. Але нормально. Дивіться, скільки нас зібралося сьогодні. Я зараз перейду на англійську, для того, щоб нас зрозуміли ті люди, які тут ходять навколо, які можливо, нічого не розуміють, чому ми тут сьогодні зібрали. Dear friends, dear Belgians, I'm talking to you in English because unfortunately my French is not good enough. But I'm trying, I'm learning, I'm studying. And to do that, some teachers are helping. Some teachers who are teaching me foreign language, foreign for me. And today I would like to speak about the similar people in Ukraine, the people of art, the people of culture, who lost their lives protecting our freedom and our country. For the first time in my life, I will use the paper to make a speech. I will use the paper because there is a long list of names. Names and what those people have done for Ukraine, for Ukrainian culture. Just 2 weeks ago, September 12th, Alexander Shapoval died. Alexander Shapoval was the ballet solist in National Opera of Ukraine. He was the cultural person, the person of culture, which is the same as Monnaie performs. But he lost his life, and he will never perform on the stage again. On the August 20, Roman Barvinok was killed by Russia. He was a violinist, similar to the people who will perform today. He was playing violin. When he was playing, the gunshots was silent because enemies and our soldiers were listening to his play. He will never play again. 8th of May in Mariupol, Bogdan Slushitsky was killed. He was a writer. He is an author of the following books: Втомлена надія, Відлуння, Світанкова роса. He was also a professor of the Mariupol University. He was teaching people. He was giving them the possibility to learn how to write. He was showing them how to touch the culture and how to be a person of culture. But he was killed. And he will never do that again. April 23rd. After the shelling of Mariupol, 2 young actresses, Елизавета Очкур and Sonia Amelchikova, they died. They were playing the little girl from Book of Narnia. They were not even 12. They were kids. Can you imagine whom can they become if in that age they were already performing on the big stage? They might be the next Oscar winners, but they will never be, because Russia took their lives. On the 1st of April, Ukrainian poet Yuri Ruf was killed in Lugansk area. He joined the army because he understood that he cannot stand away. And he was fighting for Lugansk area. On 17th of March, in a hospital, Artem Datsishin died. He was a ballet solist of the National Opera. He was shot on February 26th, on the second day of full invention. He was fighting for his life for 19 days. But before, for 19 years, he was performing in the National Opera. He was a ballet solist. Similar to the people who will perform here today. Once again, I would like to remind you about the Mariupol theater, which was bombed. And only God knows how many people died there. inside of the theater. Similar to that. It even looks like that. Not anymore. There is no theater in Mariupol anymore. If you think that Russia is killing only Ukrainian cultural people, no. On the April 3rd, Lithuanian director Mantasa Kvetravičius died in Mariupol. He was making a movie about Mariupol and about the war. He released it in 2016. And he was living in Mariupol and continuing his work. But he was killed. And he is not Ukrainian. He's Lithuanian. And it's already European Union member. How do you feel about that if the director of Monnaie will be killed by Russia? Will you perform something from the Russian cultural heritage on that stage? Will you or not? Will you think it is normal to perform such things after people from your country will die from bombs, from Russian bombs? Dear friends, it is only since the February 21st, and it is not the whole list of the people, not the whole list of the people who died and was killed. There was a massacre in Bucha where they executed the person, one of the few persons who still know the ancient Greek language. His name was Alexander Kislik, Alexander Kislik. His name, he was the historian. He was the teacher of the ancient languages. The teacher which teaches me, like the teacher who teaches me French right now. But he was teaching the old languages, which are no longer existing. And we are losing that heritage. He was translating a lot of books from the ancient Greek and the old Slavic language to the modern language. He will never do that again. And I'm not sure that there is a lot of people in the world who can do that. And we are losing people like that. Just because some dictators decided to invade another country. I will not deep dive into history. Seriously, I don't want to talk a lot about the executed Renaissance of Ukraine. You know it very well. You can read the historical books. More than 1,000 Ukrainian people of culture were killed in the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 1930s. You all know their names. It is easy to Google it if you don't know. Please Google it, and you will understand how deep the problem is. Right now, in the middle of the Brussels, Russian culture is promoted, while Ukrainian culture has been constantly killed and destroyed, piece by piece, person by person. I would like you to think about that. I would like you to think about how many kids who could become artists were killed. How many people who were helping the army just because they were people of culture. They couldn't stand away. How many of those people died of the Russian bombs? And now, I'm asking you kindly to think about, is it appropriate to perform for the Russian artists on this stage? People from Большой Theater, if you don't know what is it, it's the biggest theater in the Moscow, will perform on this stage today. And Большой Theater is sponsoring the war. Officially, they fired the actor who said something against the war, who was against the war. They fired him, they dismissed him. And the others who were silent, they are today here on this stage. If you think this is appropriate and this is okay, then I don't know what values are inside of you. What values are you standing for? I don't think that people who openly, I underline, openly stand against the war should be banned. But the ones who keep their mouths shut should be banned from everywhere. Because silently they support it. If they don't say no, the silence is yes. And other thing, I think the people of culture are the first people who should stand against the war. Who should not make money while the people are dying. If the person of culture is not standing against the war, which culture he represents? What does he represent? He is the actor of war? We don't need that. We need the actor of peace. We need the actor of love. And those people who will perform here today, they are not. Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Друзі, ви молодці! Аплодисменти самі собі. Для мене таких сьогодні не буде, ще раз підкреслюю.
Dear friends, after all that was said, I suggest a minute of silence to those Ukrainian actors, to those opera singers, to those cultural workers, and all Ukrainians who gave their life for freedom. They were coldly killed by Russian regime. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Glory to Ukraine! Glory to Ukrainian heroes! Glory to those who understand that they have civic obligations to defend democracy. Not only Ukrainians, but all those who stand up against the crazy ideas of those who come in power to terrorize, of those who come into power to oppress, of those who come into power to glorify themselves, but not to give the freedom to their people. Those who dare to speak up. Those who do everything out of their human and moral values and don't just wait until everything gets resolved by itself. You know, I have to tell you something. We had a meeting with the representatives of Monnaie yesterday. And what we told them was eye-opening. I truly believe that what we were telling them, they did not take into account. I did not think of. What they thought was innocent was not, was actually painful. And we started building the dialogue with Monnaie. And we hope that Monnaie and all the other institutions will sit down with those Ukrainians, those from colonized countries, those who were oppressed for years, marginalized, and listen to them and try to do something together. And we hope to believe that Monnaie wants to improve. That is why I stress once again, we are here not to shame but to warn. It is hard to believe, looking around at the peaceful Brussels, that we live in the time of war in Europe. And what does it mean for us here in Brussels that the rules are those of war regime? That anybody who might not seem to be the one might be a so-called agent of influence, might be the representative of the intelligence, might force the narratives of the aggressor. I'm not calling you to blame someone, to shame someone, but be alert. It is war. And it is not only happening on the battlefield. It is happening in the newspaper that you read, in the Facebook newsfeed. It is happening in the cultural sector. It is happening in the information sector. The war is happening everywhere. And we have to be informed, and informed means prepared. To distinguish propaganda, to fight against it, and to know that even we don't support the regime, even if we don't want, we might become a victim of the regime and a tool to spread propaganda. This is why we have to think twice when we do any decision, when we spread any information, when we make any cultural project. Russia has been building its propaganda machine, not just for 30 years of its independence. It was building it from the times of Russian Empire, from the times of Soviet Union. And the tools that are now used by Russian FSB are exactly the tools that were used when Stalinist regime was coming into force through the so-called Cheka intelligence. Then it became KGB. Today is FSB. And believe me, the methods did not change much. Just for your information, according to Bloomberg, it is $1.5 billion each year that Russia is spending to corrupt European high officials. And among those high officials, it's not only political decision makers. These are also the decision makers in the cultural sector. These are the decision makers in the information sector. And we have to know about it. We have to know that Russians do not only sponsor far-right movements in Europe, they sponsor also far-left movements. They sponsor media that might seem European to you, but it is actually financed by Russia. It is sponsoring the development of conspiracy theories here in Europe. Many things that you think that come from here, from Europe, they are not from here. They are from there. Because Russia didn't choose to take care about its citizens, did not choose to take care about their welfare. Instead, they are investing money, those money that could have been used by, people in God-forgotten villages. They use this money for the information war. They use this money for propaganda tools. They use this money to enforce their intelligence forces. They use this money to proceed Cold War, while we hoped that we finally put an end to it. And this is why we have to enforce ourselves. And the first way to become stronger is to become aware, to become knowledgeable of what is happening. And to become knowledgeable that all the presumably apolitical things like culture can be very much political. Because as the director of Hermitage, the most well-known Russian museum of art said, they treat culture as a type of special operation. And you know that special military operation is the way Russian state called the full-scale invasion into Ukraine. So culture is a weapon for them. And that is why this is not the right time to promote it. No Russian culture in Brussels. Say no Russian culture in Brussels. 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 No Russian
Брюссель, Брюсселі. Я не українець, я іспанець, але мої діти будуть українцями. Dear friends, dear neighbors from Brussels, I'm going to tell you a little secret, which I already told my friends in Ukrainian. I'm not Ukrainian. My dear wife is Ukrainian, I'm Spanish. But our kids, if God is good and give us money, they will be Ukrainian. And they will be also Spanish. They will be European. And how will that be? Through culture. Because we will make sure that they will be able to grow and to enjoy and to learn and to cherish their Ukrainian culture. Because that is what culture is. Culture is what brings people together, what links people with the past, but also what we bring to the next generations. Culture brings people together. And that is why culture is also an objective of the Russian military invasion in this war. Let's not be fooled. This invasion, this Russian illegal aggression against Ukraine was never about NATO or about the EU. This was a deliberate war to destroy the identity and the existence of the Ukrainian nation. This is a war of genocide. And in genocide you not only destroy physically people, you first and foremost destroy their culture. Russians have been referring to Ukrainians for centuries as little Russians. They deny the right to exist. And one of the objectives of the military is to destroy their culture. And that is why we have to take culture, Ukrainian culture, and how we approach Russian culture very carefully, because so many times, and to this day, it's been used as a tool for war, as a tool for genocide. Friends, I told you that culture is what brings people together, what builds nations, what one generation can bring to the next, and that is why Russians are destroying it. What are Russians bringing to Ukraine? Not only soldiers, they are also bringing teachers. Why? Why will Russians bring teachers to Ukraine? Are there no teachers in Ukraine? Of course there are. Why are they bringing their teachers? Because they want to impose their culture, they want to impose their language, they want to impose their version of history. This is an attempt to destroy the Ukrainian nation and to replace it with a Russian nation where it never existed. Furthermore, what are Russians taking from Ukraine? They are not only taking their grain, they are not only taking their money, they are only taking their industry, they are taking also the people. There are nearly 3 million, if I'm not mistaken, of Ukrainians who have been forcibly displaced to Russia. Hundreds of thousands of children, Ukrainian children, tens of thousands of Ukrainian orphans are being given to Russia's family, so they erase the Ukrainian identity and they impose on them a Russian identity. This is a deliberate attempt to destroy culture. That is why we have to be very careful when we are talking about the promotion of Russian culture. Russian culture is not innocent. Russian culture is a deliberate tool of the genocide that is taking place now in Ukraine. A genocide that includes destroying, as my friends have said before, the Ukrainian heritage, not only their heritage, not only these nearly 500 historical places that have been destroyed so far in this war, but also the artists that have been murdered, the publishing houses that have been destroyed, the Ukrainian books that are being destroyed in the occupied territories. Russian culture is not innocent. It's a tool of warfare, it's a tool of genocide nowadays. And that's also why we have to be very careful and what we cannot tolerate when certain naive, I would like to think that they are naive and they are not deliberately working in favor of this genocide. Certain Europeans say that the part of the Russian culture is part of our European shared heritage. Is it? Is it? Russian culture part of our European heritage? Is it what we are seeing now in Ukraine, what the Russians are doing in Ukraine? Is it something that Europeans want to preserve? Is it something that Europeans cherish? Is it something that we are proud of? Is imperialism? Because this is what's happening now in Ukraine. This is a naked war of imperial conquest, what's going on. A and a dictator and a corrupt elite that cannot offer a future to their people, so they can only feed them past glory, imagined past glory, absolutely made up, at the expense of the life and the happiness and so much destruction in Ukraine? Is imperialism what we want to bring back? Is it genocide? Have we not learned in Europe what it means? The deliberate destruction of a people, the deliberate destruction of the right of Ukrainians to exist, as has happened to so many people in our continent not so long ago. Is that European heritage? Is something that we share with Russia? Is it genocide? Is it imperialism? Is it dictatorship? Is it militarism? Is it glorifying the lack of reason, the lack of democracy? Is it something that we share with them? Ukrainians are not only fighting for the right to exist, which is the most basic right of any people, from which all other rights come. The right to exist, which is being violated on a daily basis by the Russian aggressors. Friends, we as Europeans have a responsibility to stand together with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, not only because they are defending the right to exist, but also because they are defending a European way of living. We need to remember, and actually that's something that really struck me in 2013 during the Maidan Revolution. It was the first time that you could see a European people raising the flag of the European Union as a sign of protest, as a sign of hope, a sign of a better future, or as of a sign something worth fighting for. And these same values for which they fought in 2013 and 2014, and for what Russians invaded them and started the war 8 years ago, these are the same values that they are fighting for today. For democracy, for the right to live in peace, to be who you are, have the freedom, the religion that you want, or not really, to speak the language that you want, not to be imposed, to have your national identity. So I ask you, is this what Russians are doing, coming and telling Ukrainians, no, you are Russian because I say so? Is that common European heritage? Is something that we want to preserve? I don't think so. That is why now is the moment that we as Europeans, we stand in solidarity with our European friends, with our European brothers and sisters from Ukraine, we standing by their side, helping them protect their national identity, what makes them Ukrainian, their culture, their language, their history, what is being systematically destroyed now. This is something that we need to stand by their side and to defend. And furthermore, we need to stop being the useful fools of the Russian propaganda. We cannot allow tools of Russian propaganda in the heart of Brussels, in the heart of the European Union. This is not innocent. Bolshoi theater, it's raising money for the Russian campaign of genocide in Ukraine. They are not innocent. Artists that remain silent are complicit with their country's crimes. We should not be the useful idiots of Vladimir Putin. We need to say, stop. We need to follow the example of so many European capitals that have given voice to the victims, not to the aggressors of this war. Friends, I began telling you that culture is what brings us together, and that's precisely why Russians want to destroy Ukrainian culture. Because if they destroy what needs that nation together, then they can build over the ruins their hopeless and futureless project. And that is why we, as Europeans, need to fight back and against those that want to destroy what brings the Ukrainian people together and which can bring all of us together. That other Europeans, we can learn from their rich history, from their unstoppable creativity, from the beauty of their culture that is now being destroyed. That is why, to prevent it from disappearing, we need to keep it alive. And that is why us, citizens of the European Union, have the right, the moral right, to promote and to demand from our cultural elites, and from our representatives and from our institutions that they give voice not to the aggressor but to the victim. And that today are Ukrainians, and that today are Ukrainian artists, Ukrainian creators, many of whom are bravely fighting in the trenches, not only for their country, not only for their culture, not only for their freedom, but for the true European heritage, which is not genocide, which is not imperialism, which is not war, which is peace, which is friendship and brotherhood among peoples, and which is the promise that all Europeans can live and share their culture and their lives together, and that we can build a future in peace and in democracy. So that is why I want to encourage my fellow neighbors from Brussels, my fellow European citizens, to stand by the side of our Ukrainian brothers and by the side of the brave and unstoppable Ukrainian artists. Slava Ukraini!
Just a final thing that I wanted to say before we finish this manifestation.
Bluetooth connected.
So that we just don't leave here without a message. And our message is Russian artists, Russian cultural workers, please speak up against the war. Speak up against imperialism. Speak up against colonialism. Come up and stand against this regime. Your voices matter, especially when you come to Europe to perform. Come to us. Join our demonstration. Speak up against it. Your silent skills, your inaction legitimizes the actions of war criminals. Russian artists, speak up! 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 Russian artists, speak up!
Russian artists, speak up! Russian artists, speak up! Russian artists, speak up! Russian artists, speak up! Russian artists, speak up! Russian artists, speak up! Russian artists, speak up!
Because in history, you know, in history there is no neutral position. You are either with the light or with the darkness. You are with the good side or you support the evil. Silence kills. Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Україна! 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 Слава героям ЗСУ! Слава героям ЗСУ! Слава героям ЗСУ! Гімн. Слава Україні! Слава Україні! Be brave like Ukraine and the freedom will be preserved. Thank you very much for being here and supporting the cause.
Всім дякую, хто сьогодні прийшов. Знову таки аплодисменти для вас. Друзі, слідкуйте, будь ласка, за наступними акціями у телеграм-каналі Промоут Юкрейн, на сторінці Facebook Промоут Юкрейн. Ми там викладаємо всі івенти. Будь ласка, приходьте. Нам завжди вас не вистачає на наших маніфестаціях. Дякую, що прийшли, і слава Україні!
Маленьке останнє оголошення. Ми збираємося робити невеличку демонстрацію. Чому невеличку? Тому що мало часу. Але в цей вівторок о 6 годині ми будемо робити демонстрацію, в якій ми покажемо, що ми не підтримуємо нелегальні референдуми. Тому я дуже прошу всі ті, хто народилися там, де зараз будуть проводитися референдуми на тимчасово окупованих територіях, підійти до мене або інших організаторів акції. Ви нам будете дуже потрібні на цьому флешмобі. Вам треба бути почутими. Дякую дуже.